I'm sure there'll be people joining us. There are a couple of people who have been redirected, but I think bearing in mind we really want to get everybody away for 8:30, and I realise it's a precious time. I want to start, if that's okay, and we'll just let people join us as we come in. As you can see from the agenda, we've, as we have done before, we've sort of moved away from the sort of formal stuff, and so the vote that we need, official vote approval and stuff, will take place after the meeting. And I don't mean after as in after 8:30, I mean over the next couple of days. We're going to concentrate on giving you a review of last year, the presentation of the annual report and accounts, some Q&As around that, and then a discussion around the future. Obviously, it's been a busy year with workshops and such, so we're going to pick that up. It is less formal. We are going to have some discussion and chat. We have gone for online again, hopefully more convenient for people, better attendance. It is obviously is a bit less personal, so it'd be nice if people could release the camera and let's see as many people as we can. Appreciate you might be eating your tea or something like that, so that's fine. But if you're happy to share your camera, then please do. It does feel a bit more personal when we've got sight of people. Few housekeeping rules, which on the screen I don't really need to read them all out, but please give us a wave if you've got a question. There are slots for questions, which I'll talk through. But if you don't want to speak and you want to drop it in the text, just bear with us. I'll try and pick them up and try and feed them into the discussion if we've got time. I'm going to start with a review of the year. I'm going to hand over to the exec team to do that, and let them introduce themselves as they pick it up between them. What I'll do is 7:10-ish, something like that. If the exec can finish for then, we'll have a slot for the questions there. So rather than picking up the individual pieces and the questions, I'll take all the questions at the end. Obviously, if you want to put questions in the chat, then we'll try and pick them up as well. Okay, so I'll hand over to the exec. Thank you.
Hello, so I'm Lindsay Hughes. I'm Director of Operations at Primary Care Sheffield. So I thought it'd be useful to talk a little bit about what we've done in the past. Well, it is slightly over a year since we had the last AGM. We thought it was useful to talk about the resilience of general practice. We all know that there's a lot of threats out there on the horizon at the moment. We're collectively experiencing contractual uncertainty, workforce challenges, increases in demand, patient expectation is very high. There's a lack of funding, and there's obviously the impact of the hospital recovery programme. We believe PCS plays a critical role in enabling local and impactful action. And we do this by making sure that we listen to what you're asking for and act accordingly. So what have we done in this past period? So we heard from you that you wanted us to provide flexible support during times of high demand. So over the last few winters, and in fact through the last few years, as we've delivered it in the summer as well, we've delivered flexible primary and community care services, such as the visiting service, which I know is well received. We've got GP appointments in and out of hours. We've got the RE appointments. There was 12,418 of those last year. We delivered over 6,000 A&P appointments. And we did visits as well to people with low-level mental health issues that needed just a little bit of help and support after they left hospital. We also helped avoid 269 patients going back into hospital, and we delivered a lot of urgent housebound bloods as well for those practices that needed that. We also heard from you that you wanted us to help you to compete with secondary care to draw in additional funding. And over that past period, we've brought in £1.3 million in additional funding. We've done that through ARI, we've done that through sexual health contracts. We've done that in lots of ways to ensure that that money is being brought from secondary care into primary care, and services are being delivered in a way that feels right for primary care. One of the most recent examples of that is the COVID Medicines Decision Unit, which has reduced the number of patients being double-handed. So it's avoided patients going from GP practices to 111 back to GP practices to find their pathway. And already in the first month, we've found that more patients are being referred directly from general practice because general practice seem to understand the process a little bit more. We've worked with PCNs to create a resilient enhanced access model. So 12 of the 15 PCNs felt that they needed somebody to help them with this service. So we've delivered over 40,000 hours of out-of-hours appointments. And we've helped keep those practices afloat because some of those PCNs are in more deprived areas. They struggle to get the staff in, they've struggled to deliver those service. And we've made sure for those PCNs that we've delivered this service for, that 50% of the income has gone directly back to them. So we're helping them deliver the service, but we're also helping them keep the funding. We also heard that you wanted additional opportunities providing for incomes to practices. So the most recent example of that is health checks, where we've just won the tender and the contracts are out, that we've done things like working win, enhanced access, sexual health. And of course, we've always supported practice resilience. So there's the most obvious examples of Harold Street, where we stepped in at short notice to make sure that the patient still delivered a service, that it didn't impact on the practices in that PCN, and that the staff kept their jobs. But there's also options and different examples of where we've gone out and we've worked with practices and maybe delivered a day of support or helped them through a particular issue. So that's where we felt that we've helped the practices this year. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Laura Patman. I'm Director of Finance for Primary Care Sheffield. So our external audit completed and the accounts were filed at Companies House in time for the deadline. Basically, in a nutshell, the group has had an unqualified opinion, and this is positive. It means that the accounts prepared by the finance team represent a true and fair view of the financial position in the opinion of the external auditor. So effectively, we've been signed off with a full bill of health. Just in case you don't know, the group consists of PCS, Primary Training Solutions, Sorrento and Intercare are two home care companies. The company now has been successfully trading for a number of years, and we do have twin underpinning financial principles. One being that the company remains financially sustainable over the medium term, and the other that any surplus that we would make is reinvested back into primary care. So the financial aim really continues to break even, but it's normal for there to be year-on-year fluctuations in this type of group. And obviously, as Lindsay's just mentioned, the NHS is currently suffering from severe funding pressures, and we're not immune to that either. And I know obviously that's being experienced by across the system. So the major statements in the accounts, the profit and loss account, that shows our trading position in year. The balance sheet, so that's a snapshot, one day in time, which shows the overall financial position of the company, and the cash flow. So basically how much cash has either come in or out of the company over the course of the year. So the organisation in total, so the group remains on a firm financial footing. We've got a really prudent approach to managing our finances. If it wasn't for the accountancy adjustment that we had to make relating to Intercare and the fact that Intercare will no longer exist after April, the group would have been operating around the break-even point for the period that these accounts cover. However, because Intercare will no longer exist from April, we knew of that whilst the external auditors were still auditing the company. We had to recognise that change within these accounts, because it's a major, it's a material impact on the accounts, but it is not cash related. It is an accountancy adjustment. And although there's been a reduction in cash over the period, we've also seen debtors increase. So it was just at the point of the balance sheet date, we had money owed to us, which we've now collected. Sorry, I've forgotten to tell Andrew to move the slides on. Can you move the slide on, please, Andrew? So all in all, the company is continuing to grow its turnover, and that's in line with the expectations set for us by the board. Our aim is to continue to grow. But going forward, there are certain key financial considerations that we need to keep in mind. One, like I said earlier, financial sustainability is absolutely key for us, so we can continue supporting primary care in Sheffield. Our contract lengths, and I know that this is being experienced very keenly at the moment, our contract lengths are normally quite restrictive, in that we would like contracts for a longer amount of time, particularly from the ICB, to give us a bit more stability. And also, lastly, ensuring value for money. So meaning that the resources that we do have are spent in the best way in order to promote world-class primary care. Thanks, Chair. You're on mute, Colin.
Thanks, Lindsay and Laura, for that very brief rattle through. And I was just going to touch on another element of what PCS does, and then we'll open it up for questions. The annual report obviously has been shared in advance, and there's far more detail in that in terms of what we do and what we've done over the last 12 months. The leadership, the influencing the system, the being involved in a range of sort of meetings is a big part of the work that goes relatively unnoticed. It goes on behind the scenes, and PCS is involved across a range of forums, influencing and championing on behalf of shareholders, GP practices in Sheffield. Clearly, that work's not done in isolation. We work closely with colleagues in the LMC, with colleagues on CLG, with localities, and through the PCNs as well, so that we have got a collective approach, both at a Sheffield level as a key partner in Sheffield's Health and Care Partnership within that governance, working to develop new approaches, test new ways of working, start to tackle certain challenges like digital or estates issues for general practice, pushing for more resource in primary care. A really good example, I was at an ICB meeting today, really flagging the risks and around the potential of decommissioning Ardens as a tool, and the ICB looking at how they continue to fund that, but absolutely flagging the risk based on a lot of the feedback that we've had from colleagues in Sheffield around that, which is really helpful to be able to then feed that into system meetings. We've been influential in developing a primary care provider alliance for South Yorkshire, really to get primary care as providers heard at a system level, and developing a strategy around primary care for South Yorkshire, which meets the needs of what we're trying to do in Sheffield. Again, flagging on a repeated basis the issues around inequalities, the challenges that it has, where things like QOF impact on practices in deprived areas, etc. Again, taking feedback from your locality representatives at board, from meetings with the PCN CDs, and from conversations with you as shareholders, all of which is important. And then at times, again, at a national level, getting involved in conversations either with NHS England at the region or centrally around key issues for general practice, and trying to steer the future for the benefit of shareholders. And examples of where that can then make a difference, things like carrying over resources from one financial year to the next, so that it doesn't go back to the centre. We've just been asked to carry some funding over for targeted lung health checks in Sheffield, so that it's not lost. We've done it before with PCN development monies and a range of other monies, which just, again, our infrastructure helps with that, and our connections in a leadership position can help. We ran the 3 workshops over the summer and the primary care summit, or GP summit, back in September, which is one of the reasons why our AGM is a bit later this year. We didn't think it was appropriate to have yet another evening meeting shortly after the summit in September, so we've delayed it because of that. But again, using our infrastructure to bring general practice together as a set of colleagues to think about how we design our own futures. And we're continuing to have conversations with colleagues, LMC, CLG colleagues, localities and PCNs around some of the outputs from that clinical summit in September, to look at a GP provider forum for Sheffield, how we get that consensus voice in a single forum. Colin, I'll hand over back to you and let you chair some questions for exec on the annual report, which, as I say, has been shared, and anything that they've heard so far.
Okay. Apologies as well, the remiss of me. I know many of you from either the workshops in the summer or from trying to get round as many practices as possible, but I've been chair for 1 year, first year as chair, although I've been in non-exec of primary care for 3 years before that. So apologies for my missing. So I'd sort of want to take questions really specifically on this, on last year, review of last year, any one of the presentations, or anything else from what you'd like to pick up. Please raise your hand, wave, and I'll try and pick it up. No questions whatsoever. It's going to be we're breathing. Some of the executives.
Be a quick meeting.
Sigh of relief if there's no questions. Happy to move on if there's nothing. Okay. I will. I think we can move on to the second part then. Really, the discussion about the future. That's okay.
Can we share the slides again then, Andrew, please?
Obviously, a lot of people not had the tea yet. Okay.
So we thought this evening might be a bit of an opportunity just to share some reflections that we've been doing at a board level over the last 6-9 months around PCS's 3 to 5 year strategy. It's pretty hard to have a strategy much beyond 4 or 5 years at the moment, given the uncertainty in the country around the political situation, around the NHS, etc. But trying to sort of shape where we think we fit and wanting to test that out with shareholders. And this comes off a sort of a context and a range of work, which I'm sure many of you are already aware of, not least the demand that we all face on a day-to-day basis and the intensity with which we work. I don't think any of us feel that we have enough time to do the job as well as we'd like. And I think reflecting on some of the conversations at the workshops over the summer, I think definitely we feel that our relationships with our patients has gradually been eroded over the last 10 years, which is to the detriment of everybody. We've seen austerity and poverty drive inequalities. We've seen political uncertainty around potentially the future contract create anxiety and frustration amongst colleagues, and a real sense that we could do better for our patients. So some of that's some of the context within which PCS is working, and thinking about how we support and put a bit of consistency and a bit of certainty in for shareholders. On the other side of the coin, you know, we know that there's a huge spend on health in Sheffield, over £1 billion a year, and primary care general practice is a very small proportion of that. But it wouldn't take much of a shift in that resource to make a massive difference for us in general practice. And so starting to think about, well, how could we facilitate that shift without it feeling like it's just more work being dumped onto general practice, but how could we facilitate a left shift in resource? The other bit which really kept shone through from those workshops in the summer was the importance of continuity of care, and actually that at times some of the fast care, that same day demand, almost takes us away from delivering continuity to those that need it most, to the complex, the frail patients, and whether or not there's something through our infrastructure that can support that and perhaps do some of the fast care that doesn't require continuity as much as the complex, so that it frees up practice time to do the more important stuff that only they can do. And again, looking at all our services, how do our services support you in terms of taking pressure off you? So our approach has been a range of things. The 3 workshops and the GP Summit back in September, which engaged, you know, shareholders, practices, a range of folk across a range of meetings, and taking feedback from that. And you're thinking, as an exec team and as a board, we've had a number of strategic development sessions, again, to think about the context and what we're doing. And we've had task and finish groups from board, thinking about our board structures and governance for the future, and how do we make sure that we've got a board that meets the needs of a company which is increasing in size and turnover, as Laura said, has the right skills on it, the right expertise to manage a small to medium-sized enterprise, and at the same time remains well connected and engaged with shareholders. Thanks, Andrew. Next slide, yeah. So, and we've drawn it before for a number of years, so it sort of feels like it still fits into the same thinking around this Venn diagram of 3 things that we think we should be doing. Firstly, the support of general practice, allowing practices to flourish through our infrastructure, through back office support where we can, through resilience and rescue at times, as Lindsay alluded to, through training and development opportunities for staff, developing further PTS. And I know we're working through PTS with a number of shareholder colleagues, so that they're really driving how PTS develops its training packages that meet the needs, therefore, of the practices themselves, and that's really appreciated. The second sort of overlapping circle on the Venn diagram is the delivery of a range of wraparound services or at-scale services that benefit the needs of shareholders, benefit primary care, benefit patients, and hopefully as well benefits the system. And there's examples of where we've done that already through things like the ARI appointments, but scope for more. And I think fundamentally we really think we should be delivering 24-hour access for general practice 7 days a week. So whereas at the moment some of that resource sits in other parts of the system in a very fragmented model, some of the stuff that came out of those workshops over the summer was our practices, our shareholders, you guys saying, actually, it would make more sense if some of that at scale out of our stuff worked through PCS in a very integrated way with the practices and the PCNs. And so we do think that that's part of our future. And to a degree, we want to sort of test that again with you. It's what we've heard from you, but we want to test it and then potentially get that as a message. Emma Latimer at the summit in September gave us a very clear steer that she wanted practices to come up with some things that they felt were priorities and wanted her to shift, and I think that should be one of them. Work around elective pathways. We're working in a very transactional way with secondary care. We're talking about this secondary care, primary care interface, and the dumping of work either way in each direction. And I think that's one of the issues that's swamping us and making us feel overworked. But actually, if we worked in a much more integrated way with our secondary care colleagues, with our specialist colleagues, up and down pathways, the scope for us to feel that the job adds a lot more value, and those relationships add a lot more value, rather than being transactional and pushing work in one direction or another. And that probably needs to happen in an integrated way at a neighbourhood level. And so supporting neighbourhood delivery in partnership with other partners in the HCP is another part of our strategy in that middle bubble. Not without its challenges, as I'm sure people recognise with some of the issues around mental health at the moment. And then finally, that third circle in the Venn diagram of future care, of thinking about how are we innovative. If we want world-class general practice in Sheffield, we've got to test new models, we've got to try things. Some of it will work, some of it won't, and we think that's what we can be doing, and then sharing that learning with shareholders. I know there's a workshop coming up around Anima, the digital triage tool, which we're testing in some of our practices, and I know there's a lot of interest from practices that are shareholders in terms of our learning, and we're very willing and happy to share that. That's what we're about. Research in primary care feels like something that there is opportunity to develop and expand, and again, we're trying to do that and support an increased engagement in research in primary care. And then the myriad of system meetings that we're in with others to influence and support, as I say, in a collaborative way with localities, with LMC, with PCNs and so on. Next slide, please, Andrew. Some of the sort of key things, or key points, or principles that we think are important in delivering that strategy. We remain rooted in the NHS values. We're rooted in general practice, and therefore our shareholders have to be fundamental to what we do. We need your support, your buy-in. We want to work with you across our collective layers of scale, and I think in doing that, it means that general practice will have greater legitimacy, greater security, and greater influence in the system, and a more robust and resilient approach. We want to be world class, so again, we need to be thinking about how do we test models of care, how do we harness technology and share that learning. And then finally, what about our workforce? How do we make sure that our workforce feel valued, feel empowered, feel supported to develop, and in return that they value the work that they do as a result? And I don't just mean that within PCS, I mean that across general practice in Sheffield. Next slide, please. And then I guess the question for us this evening is then, are those the right things that we're suggesting? Is the Venn diagram still correct? And how do we work together collectively? How do you use your organisation, PCS, to support you and to get the best for your patients? And then some suggestions on there, which I won't read out, but around how do we create coordinated services across the layers? How do we make sure that we're using that infrastructure that we've created to shift investment and resource from other parts of the system, which seems to be the holy grail that we talk about as a system, but doesn't seem to materialize? And how do we make sure that we push work upstream into a really integrated approach at a neighbourhood level? So I think there's some questions there for discussion, Colin, if people want to contribute. As you say, it's been a long day for all of us, so recognise that people might be tired and frazzled, but this is an opportunity to have a bit of a discussion about whether we've got it right, whether the board and the exec have got their thinking right in terms of the strategy.
Yeah, okay, I'll pick that up. Clearly, as it says there, there's 3 questions which pick up really on what Andy's saying. Is our focus right? Have we got the right medium-term strategic focus at the moment, bearing in mind the context that we're in? Is our governance right? The way we're looking at that with the board at the moment, reviewing different ways of working, hearing the voices from you and letting that impact on the board, whilst at the same time making sure we've got a robust board arrangements for what is a growing company. And really from you guys, is there anything else we should be focusing on? Is there anything else we should be discussing? Obviously, there's been 3 meetings across the summer and the summit, and trying to fit our role into that, really. So again, happy to take any questions and start a discussion around that. Hi, Amir.
Hi, sorry, I can't find the hand up thing on this. So
Okay, you're in?
yeah, thank you.
Fire away.
Yeah, just a couple of reflections, really. Again, sounds great in theory. And whenever I come to these board meetings, you know, I think, wouldn't it be brilliant if all this came about? I think PCS has made some progress, some very good progress in terms of getting the pharmacist into general practice, some of the hub work. My plea to PCS would be is that when you talk about integrated services, my experience is that actually it just gets dumped on general practice. And the fact that the rest of the system has absolutely no idea of how general practice works, the intensity with which we work. Just one example from yesterday, when my partner, after an hour and 10 minutes of frustration of trying to get somebody who was fairly ill under the neurologists, trying to do the right thing because he didn't want to send them to A&E because he knew the neurology was based at Hallamshire, eventually had to go back to the switchboard because of their new system and say, I don't care about this new system. I want you to put me through to a neurologist so that I can get on with my surgery, which by that stage he had another 8 people waiting to see him. That's just one example of money. I won't bore you with the mental health and the kind of issues that we're having there, where mental health turns around and says, well, you know, PCS is one of the third partners involved in this change, looking at PCS as if, quite right, you know, as if they are representatives of me as a general practitioner. But it doesn't feel like it, because if PCS represents primary care in general and general practice in particular, then really they should be talking to our partners in secondary care and saying, look, this isn't working out. And trust me, I don't mean to be negative. Hopefully this is kind of constructive. And after so many years, there still seems to be some kind of a disconnect between some general practitioners and PCS, and dare I say it, almost an us and them attitude, you know, my partners included, who actually don't know exactly what PCS is. A new GP that I just happened to meet socially a few months ago, who turned around and said, oh wow, there's this organization, isn't it, that's just taking on most of Sheffield. I said, what's that? He said, PCS. I said, no, it's not. That's part and parcel of, you know, the whole general practice in Sheffield. So some perceptions are still there, and I've yet to still see people come and talk to my partners. I'm slightly different because I know Andy. I've known Andy a long time. I've kind of been involved in various forums, but actually it would be nice if somebody came and spoke to my partners and said, look, we're PCS. This is exactly what we do. So just few reflections there, really.
Yeah. Okay, Amir, we can look at that from the execs and take some of them points. As you've put 3 or 4 points there, Lindsay.
And
Just go in, Andy.
Go on after you, Lindsay.
I was going to say on the meeting with your partners, I'll start at that point. Neil and I do a bit of a roadshow. So on the service update that we send out weekly, there's a button on there that says if you want to come and see us. So for some practices, we're on our 3rd and 4th visits of seeing them. We see them every sort of 4 or 5 months. I tend to see at least 1 or 2 practices a week. What we do see, though, is some of the same practices coming round and round and round. So it'd be really good if people want to, just on that service update, or just drop us a line. We're always willing to come and talk to people. We've had some where we've gone to sites and met with a couple of practices at once. You know, maybe they feel more comfortable with more than one practice in the room. But most of them, it's practice to us. And I'd love that opportunity to come and talk to you. If you want to just drop me a line and we'll sort that out.
Okay, I'll have a word with them. On Monday, we have our practice meeting. So it's the practice actually getting some time to come and speak to PCS, or is it that we request a visit and somebody from PCS comes and talks to them?
We come talk to you. So you just tell us when's convenient. We don't presume to know when's best for you. You tell us when it's convenient and we'll make it happen.
Okay.
Okay, Andy?
Yeah, we did have some regular lunchtime sessions on Teams for practices, and we've sort of put them in, and then I think we probably had some good uptake initially, and I think the need dropped off, so we paused them, but we can certainly put that in again. I mean, that's what we want is active conversations. That's what this evening's about. I mean, yeah, there's 41 of us on tonight, and I know it's really hard after a day's work to come to the stuff like this. Hopefully doing it on Zoom helps in terms of not having to travel, but we can, as well as the stuff Lindsay's talked about, we can put back on some of those team sessions at a lunchtime to improve communication. And just in terms of reassurance, Amir, we are constantly pushing back at the rest of the system and saying the things, as I'm sure you are. And I'm it's not just PCS, it's those of us that are in leadership positions in a range of forums that are doing it. I don't know what the answer is in terms of turning the tide. I don't know quite how you change the very secondary care centric view of the NHS, and it's not just locally, is it? It's nationally. It's the media. It's politicians, and I don't quite know how you change that. But needless to say, we are pushing and reminding of the work that practices do, and I think sometimes there's this misconception that the PCS narrative is all about place scale and not about what's happening at an individual practice level. That isn't the case. I remain a partner in a practice, and I'm always talking about the values of the individual practice. At the same time, recognizing that practices are far stronger if they're part of networks, localities, and PCS at a city-wide level. So I think that's what we're trying to sort of reflect in our strategy. That we're part of a layered approach.
Thanks, Andy. I must admit, Amir, I'm newer to this than many of you, and I suppose I come from the world of business and sort of running businesses in Sheffield. But one of the things that I thought sort of highlights what you said is when we did sit in the groups, and we did have Emma Latimer in place when we spoke for the summit. I think we did give Emma, and as a group now, the impression that we were a little divided and not so cohesive. And it's one of the things that I've noticed sitting in the chairs groups, sitting with the STH and others. They sit as a single body with a single chief exec, and easier for them to get the messages across. We've got a complex network with lots of people, and situations like that, I'm pretty sure that Emma would be listening to several messages. I'm wondering, trying to, that's what PCS is here, trying to give a single message, but it's not easy. Andy?
I was just looking at the chat and a question, Colin, from Joe around the ICB changes and funding cuts, and I guess we've been one step removed from it because it's been in the ICB, not PCS. What I would say is that I've a huge amount of empathy for staff in the ICB who've been through a really torrid time over a prolonged period with the uncertainty of CCGs moving into ICBs, and then a further uncertainty around running cost reductions and losses or reorganisation of jobs. And I think the impact that that's had for us as PCS, but also for us as GPs in the system, is that there's been a distraction away perhaps from some of the other important work that needs to go on. And that's not a criticism, that's just an observation. I think from what I understand from Emma Latimer, they're almost through some of those difficult changes, and we had a very positive exec to exec with them this morning about how we can work with them in partnership for the benefit of practices over the next 12 months. But it hasn't been an easy time.
Lucy.
Thanks. I think I want to go back to Amir really briefly, because he did touch on some of the PCMH stuff, and I think it would be slightly remiss of us not to respond to that, because we know there's a lot of disgruntlement, unsettlement in the city about some of the services that we're seeing, and not necessarily, I don't think, within PCMH, but more within the secondary care services. And I think there's a very much a greying of the boundaries in terms of what that looks like. And I think it's being clear, isn't it, that PCMH is a separate service that's being commissioned that has certain criteria that we have to stick to in terms of SMI, but it is an additional service into primary care. Secondary care services still exist, and we should still be able to refer into them. And so some of the bouncing around is a problem with secondary care. And I think the reassurance from us in PCS is we are really pushing hard on that this isn't, you can't use PCMH as a service to step up what the problems are in secondary care. We're hearing it. And I think it's my reassurance really that we are acting on it, and we are trying to push SHSC that we want some really clear criteria in terms of what they are accepting into their services, and if not, why they're not doing it. That's something that we are constantly pushing out. And I suppose I just didn't want to let that point drop, Amir, because I think it is so important at the moment that we are all really struggling with it. And, I work in primary care. I have the same frustrations that everyone else does. So yeah, I suppose I just wanted to reassure you of that.
Yeah, just coming back on that, Lucy. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's only a couple of days ago that kind of something that Andy said made me think is that we need clarity around, particularly around this issue. More importantly, I think we need honesty. We just need honesty from somebody to say, this is what we can deliver realistically, so that we can be honest with our patients. And instead of, the old adage of promising a gold or a platinum star service and just barely being managed, to deliver bronze. But your first point is absolutely right, because for most of us in general practice, mental health is just mental health. It's just, and it's all got confused. But it's also got confused from other parts of the system, because everybody and their auntie now writes back to certainly us, and I'm sure other GPs will have a similar experience, or refer to PMHSC, SPA, secondary care. They also need educating that actually there's a specific remit for this service. I see lots of hands up, Colin, and just before I finish, one of the mantra in general practice was, when I started general practice, and for me, to a large extent still exists, is that we deal with individuals, not populations like our secondary care colleagues. Albeit we've now moved on to slightly larger populations than our own practices, our particular areas or PCNs still have varying needs, although we're in the same city. And I think, the thing that I've always found incredibly attractive about an organization like PCS is at least a part of it should be an umbrella organization that allows the flexibility for the different populations that we serve and their different needs. And therefore, stand in the background to me. And I'll always give the example of the pharmacist, because I think that was such a massive success from where I stand. But stand in the background and then allow me the flexibility to use the various resources as they best suit my practice or my network. I'll shut up now because there's about 3 different hands up.
Thanks, Amir. I'm going to pick up Thomas next. I think you've had your hand up a while.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Lucy, your comment on that one as well, because it has been really felt, I think, in many practices. Within that, I would like to issue a little bit of a challenge to PCS to make it obvious when there is pushback. Make it obvious to us when there's pushback, because we want I was going to say we want the ill feeling to be harbored in the right place, but no, we want to be reassured, I think is a better term, that these concerns are going to the correct place. But thank you for that, Lucy.
Okay. Lindsay?
As if seamlessly, as if I knew what Tom was going to say. So one of the things we've done is been liaising in the background with Tom Holdsworth to see when and how we can set up a meeting with CDs and PCN managers. I think one of the things we've done with PCMH is we're in a partnership, and because we've been pushing constantly against SHSC, we've tried not to wear our dirty laundry. Similarly, I'm sure you wouldn't come out and tell me all about the things that are happening in the background in your practice or in your PCN. We've tried to hold a line, but we now have this firm offer. And so we feel that we need to come and talk to you openly as our shareholders, behind closed doors, without SHSC there, without ICB colleagues there, and tell you all the things that we've done and all the things that we've pushed and how we've got more funding than we started with, how we've got services that weren't meant to be there, how we've got them to reduce waiting lists and not pass them back to primary care. But so far along this journey, we have tried to hold that partnership line, and perhaps that was a mistake, but it felt like the right thing to do, because if you don't have their trust, you're never going to get any further with them. But there is a meeting planned, and hopefully, depending on permissions from other people, I'm hoping it's the next PCN subcommittee. If it's not, we'll do it very soon after. So it should be in the next few weeks, where we'll come and talk to you all about all of it, and lay out what's happened along the way, so that you have an understanding of, I'm sure you can't see it, but PCS has pushed against a lot of those barriers. Sometimes we've been successful, sometimes we haven't, but I still think we're in a better place than if we'd never been involved.
Thank you, Lindsay. So, Andy?
I was just sort of thinking, I was looking, there's no other hands up at the minute. So I was just sort of reflecting on the various comments and almost sort of feeling like some of the conversation fits into those 3 circles on a Venn diagram, in terms of trying to deliver some services that wrap around practices, trying to support practices in their own right with infrastructure and resilience and so on, and then the system leadership that comes out of those first 2 circles, because we realise how things could be better. And so I guess the question back is that to shareholders, is that right? And Amir's challenge about us, at the beginning, Amir, about whether we're communicating properly, whether people understand what we're doing, whether we are connected to practices. This is the reason for evenings like tonight, where we want to test stuff, we want to have the conversation and the dialogue. And I think from what I've heard, our communication has improved considerably over the last few years in terms of how the various ways that we do engage. But this is an opportunity to have that ongoing conversation for us to test strategy. And if we don't hear anything, we don't know whether we're getting it right or wrong. At least if we get feedback, we can then act on that feedback. And what we're really after is that ongoing dialogue about the future, because whilst the future is uncertain, I think we've got a real opportunity in Sheffield to keep shaping it. And regardless of what political parties in power, regardless of what NHS England do around policy, I think there is real scope for us to maintain resilience across the layers of scale that I've talked about.
Thanks, Andy. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on anything else we should be doing, or in terms of the strategy as Andy's outlined it? Thomas, thank you.
I'm conscious that you know, as you point out, we're in a period of significant change, and I know that you need a plan and a strategy for the next period of years. I guess, again, another challenge for you today is how are we going to be reactive to change in potentially March, and then March next year, for example. And the reason I asked that question is when we had changes to PCNs and network contracts, the ICB was fairly slow in engaging with us. PCS, I think, has the advantage of being able to be more reactive and be able to be swifter off the mark. But I would challenge you to not only make that to be very active, but also to make it very obvious to us when you are being, so that we can feed in and we can feel that as well.
Thomas, how do you feel? What's your view on the communication that you receive? I mean, just picking up on what Amir's point. I mean, do you feel you're getting enough information?
I feel that, for me, being a CD, one of the clinical directors, I have a lot of information, and so I probably get the right amount. I suspect if you asked my partner, they would probably have far less of an idea, but are happy with that. So it's a real difficult balance that I think you have to maintain here of offering enough information without bombarding, and also allowing the people who want to know, who want to be involved, to hear it. I may have a slightly sort of biased view there, though, I'll be honest.
No, well, it's a view, Thomas. That's what's important. Thank you. Marie.
Hi. First of all, in terms of communication, I'm a business manager, and I think communication is really good. But I'm very aware that I'm the ones opted in to get in the communications, to get in the emails. But it's my job then to pass that information on. But yeah, I'm very happy with communication. One of the things I wanted to ask was, what's your plan for health inequalities for the future? Because obviously you've got lots of practices that will be struggling with funding in relation to health inequalities. Do you have a plan, please?
Andy?
Well, I was gonna suggest Lucy might be closer to the detail on it, but what I would say is that we, through our business plan, and what we will be sending out our business plan after the AGM, and asking shareholders to sort of ratify it in terms of what they think we should be doing moving forward. It's what we think we should be doing. But we think doing inequality should be something that flows through everything that we do. And in terms of our leadership position, for example, we have pushed a range of issues around some of the challenges for practices in deprived areas, some of the ways that GP contract worsens inequalities around vaccines and so on. So we have done a range of thinking about it. Up until very recently, we've been involved with VAS and the Voluntary Sector Alliance in terms of trying to think about how we support them around inequalities. And then Lou Millington works for us and has done for a number of years in a citywide role as an inclusion champion. So again, a range of things that we think inequalities is really high up on the list. But that's just a quick off the top of my head. I don't know whether Lucy or Lindsay or anyone else wants to come in.
Nothing more specific. I think Marie, as all of our practices pretty much sit within areas of deprivation, it sits so high on our list of priorities. And I think the really important thing is that we use our influence as much as we can to raise those issues to the people who can make change. Things like the vaccines, kind of keeping that message going. Really key to us that whenever we're developing new services, looking at how that impacts on health inequalities. And that's kind of the question that we ask ourselves at the very beginning of everything. Will this worsen health inequalities, and what can we do to help address it? So things like health checks, making initially they are looking at particularly in areas of deprivation and people with health and quality. So I think it sits through everything we do. In terms of an actual written down plan, being really honest, no, we don't have one. But I think it's because we live and breathe it. That is what we do. Then I genuinely think it sits at the heart of us as an organisation.
Thank you. I think that does shine through, actually. I suppose I was hoping, because that is evident that you do lots, I wondered whether there was any other plans for extra funding chats, anything in the pipeline really around funding.
It's so hard because funding doesn't necessarily come from us. But one of the things that we do look at in terms of our financial sustainability is that we look at things that we might branch into to keep us going. But alongside that, if we were to do something that wasn't necessarily in a deprived area, then if it generates income, how do we use that income to improve health inequality? So everything that we do will then look at, well, if that makes a little bit of income, what are we going to put it into that will make the health of our city better? Because that has to be a priority. So yeah, it's there. There's no definitive written plan, but it's definitely there for us.
Andy?
Thanks, Colin. My hand went up before Marie came in, so it's a slightly different topic. So if there's anything else on the inequalities, I'd let people come in first. But
just the note there that Susie's put on about we hear more nationally about inequalities, but yet to see anything in health funding plans. Yeah,
I think that's a fair point.
Yeah.
So Tom mentioned about sort of the connectedness and sort of on a similar vein to Amir, and I guess I just thought I might mention that the board have been going through some discussions around our board structure, as I said earlier, in terms of making sure that we've got the right skills on the board to run a medium-sized organisation with a turnover of 20 plus million, and then secondly, to make sure that we've got the right structures to engage with shareholders, and to make sure that shareholders feel that they're steering our strategy, that they feel connected. And it's always a challenge. We are starting to, we've got a task and finish group that sits beneath the board that's working up some options that we want to come out to shareholders with. And so, you know, we wondered even about the potential of bringing wider folk into some sort of forum that steers the board and steers the strategy and might meet quarterly. We've not worked through the detail, but we will be sharing it. I just thought it was an opportunity to mention it, so it didn't sort of land in due course and people think, well, why didn't they mention it at the AGM? So I have done, and we'll keep working on it, and then communicate it out to people for discussion and a view.
Thanks, Andy. Any other questions on Maria?
Hi. I was just thinking back to when I first got involved with PCS, and that was around the time of the Prime Minister's Challenge Fund. And there was huge angst at that point amongst the GPs in the city. A lot of experienced GPs were leaving, going locuming, looking for other jobs. And a lot of the younger GPs also were very unhappy with the way things were. And at that time, Iolanthe Fowler and I did a survey. We invited GPs to write in. There was a series of questions. And it was really very interesting that people had very, very different interests, although everybody was a GP, because let's face it, you come into general practice. Once you come in, things don't change very much. There's not much career progression unless you become a CD or branch off into something outside the actual practice. But the career doesn't really exist in the same way as it does in other specialties. And we thought then, there was a lot of discussion then about whether we should have some kind of career structure within general practice. And we were going to start talking about this, but then events overtook us, I guess. And we ended up with COVID and so on. But I wondered if you were thinking of putting on any more workshops, other than the ones that happened last year, but looking to the future to see if there are other ways that we could look at how we work. You know, is there some possibility of having a more senior structure within general practice so that people taken off them, but they act more as mentors or managing specific areas. I know this when the PCNs first started, there was talk of that, wasn't there, of having cancer champions and cardiovascular champions within a PCN, but that never really took off, did it? And I think that, might be a way of retaining perhaps some of the GPs who are planning to retire early, and it would be perhaps very supportive to the younger GPs coming along. I don't know, it's just a thought, and I wondered what you all thought about it.
Okay, thank you for that. Andy?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point to make, Maria. And yeah, it is a very flat structure, isn't it? And yet we all develop different skills throughout our careers. So to a degree, that's what we hoped cases would do. We hope cases, as well as allowing people to take on sort of peer review roles and develop skills in a certain specialty, we hoped it would be commissioned into more and community clinics. And actually, since cases have existed, what we've seen is we've lost the community clinics that existed in central locality, and nothing's replaced them. So I think the plan always was that they would be replaced. So there's been a bit of a hiatus in that. Again, I'd be really keen that we think about how you do that, because portfolio careers is what will keep people interested and retain staff. And we know that something like 20% of the GP workforce across South Yorkshire are over the age of 55. That's as of November last year. And if you look at partners, the percentage is 27% of partners are over the age of 55. So it is potentially a ticking time bomb for us in terms of workforce crisis if we're not already in a crisis. But actually, you could retain some of those people if they're doing, working in a more flexible way, in a different way, with a range of roles, really harnessing their experience. And I think through stuff like cases with elective care, potentially through hub work that sifts off some of the low-hanging fruit at different times in the day to take pressure off practices, there is an opportunity to give people a range of career options in general practice rather than just the very flat structure that you described. But again, that's we've all got to be up for that, and then we've got to think about, well, how do we deliver it? And that isn't about, often that you say something like that and it suddenly feels really threatening. And I think when you're working in an environment when people are talking about, what the future of the contract will be, it all feels threatening. But it's not a binary one or the other. The LMC conference vote around, do you take acute care out of general practice? And they voted no, not to. Let's keep it together. That's such a binary decision. But actually, if it's about do you team and ladle some of the demand off practices towards the end of the day so they can get on with complex stuff into an at-scale model, well, actually that's a very different future, and actually might make all our working lives better. So I think you're right to raise it. We haven't done anything more in terms of the workshops, because I think there's some ongoing discussions about pulling together a provider forum, that group to come up with a consensus view. But maybe after that, we need to keep, one of the things we need to keep doing is keep talking about what does the future look like, and shaping it.
I think so. It was interesting actually what Lucy said. She was talking about Anima, and one of the things that came out of that was that some GPs were complaining that they were getting very complex cases to deal with. Well, this is true. If you hive off a lot of the simpler stuff, you end up with the really complex cases. And these are the sort of cases that need, more experienced GPs who then mentor less experienced GPs in how you manage that complexity. So once we go over to total triage, which looks as if that's the direction of travel, a portfolio career might actually be exactly what we need. Because otherwise you're going to be throwing these people out, people with incredibly complex needs, and perhaps less experienced GPs are going to have to manage them, really struggling. And, it's perhaps an unintended consequence in a way of that total triage.
Amy, you want to come in on the same topic? Do you want to come in?
Hi, yes, I'm Amy Small. I'm the sessional rep for Yorkshire and the Humber to the BMA. I moved to Sheffield a year and a half ago and have started to set up a sort of sessional support group on WhatsApp. I've been trying to set up a chamber to kind of get locums and sessional doctors together. And I guess what I've seen, particularly in Sheffield over the last sort of 6 months, is a move for practices using platforms like Nightingale to employ more and more AMPs as locums, more PAs as locums, and locums are out of work at the moment. And it's been a really scary time for locums because there just hasn't been the work out there that there was previously. So I guess it's just coming back on what you're saying. You know, a lot of us do have portfolio careers. I'm 15 years a GP now. I locum 2 days a week, mostly in the same practice because I'm a big believer in continuity of care and the importance that brings with it. But I have other jobs as well. And I guess it's just highlighting the reality that several GPs have now looked to move elsewhere, Canada, Australia. Others are looking to leave general practice altogether. Others are looking to, you know, completely leave, you know, the locum workforce in Sheffield. And to me, that's really concerning. That, you know, we are. Don't get me wrong, I was a partner for 10 years. You know, I understand budgets. I understand, you know, all of that. I guess I just think there's some sort of short-sightedness going on at the moment. And I guess it's how do we collectively work together as a group of GPs, partners, salaried locums, all together to look at how we can retain our general practitioners that have worked really hard to get where they are, and want to remain in the workforce and want to remain in Sheffield. So I guess it's just kind of on a bigger scale, you know, raising those issues, and just making sure that we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater when we are employing, you know, lower paid, and as you say, people that pick off all the easy stuff, because then that just leaves us with the really complex things.
Good point, Amy. Anybody want to come in on that? There's a narrative from Natalie back to you, Marie, just in terms of some options. Amir?
Yeah, then after me, Charles is waving frantically. Hi, Charles. Amy, just a very quick point on that. I just wonder what the situation would be like if the ARRS roles allowed GPs to be employed. It's as simple as that, because I know what I would do. And I also have now experienced firsthand the value of some of these other roles, but what it's doing to general practice is not good. And our political masters are not going to see that, because all they're going to be doing is counting pennies. But our poor patients, again, widening the health inequalities, because those populations that are empowered actually know the difference between an ANP or a PA or a etc. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. But it's a wider problem, much further up the system.
Okay, thanks, Amir. You said Charles. I can't actually.
Hi, it's Charles here.
Hi, Charles.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Hi. If you don't really know me, I'm a GP at Burley Health Centre. I've just spent a day teaching PAs cardiology as part of my cases role, and what came across to me from them was just how much they love working with GPs, how much they respect GPs, how much in awe of GPs' knowledge and skills they are. And just what a great bunch they are. And they're having a really, really hard time at the moment from what I would describe as protectionist attitudes by our union and others. It's disappointing, actually, because I don't think they understand the roles. And I think, like Maria says, what they really value is the expertise and the ability for GPs to recognize things, rely on their experience and their incredible competence to lead a team. And I just think a lot of the work that PCS is doing is showing us how to do that at scale and showing us how to organize it. So my question really, sorry, was what, and that was, I did all that because of cases, and they value cases hugely at the PAs. I think there's a mixed attitude amongst GPs in Sheffield because it hasn't shown its promise. And I just wonder what the future is. becoming a less important aspect of PCS's existence, which is absolutely brilliant. I think, you know, PCS should be, its strength is in many other things, but I'm just wondering what you think the future is across SYNB in terms of how to do this and how to make community services flourish, because hearing what the weight is for cardiology triage and assessment within the specialty, we really do need expertise in the community.
Maria? You're on mute, Maria.
Sorry, I'm on my mobile because the Wi-Fi here is so poor with the laptop. Yeah, I agree with Charles. We have 5 PAs at the moment, and we train PA students. And, you know, they don't replace GPs, but they're just a huge additional workforce, which is very skilled. And they work alongside GPs, and they've increased our access. And actually, they get more compliments from the patients than the doctors do. So they're doing something right. And the big problem is that they can't replace GPs in the sense that they need a lot of supervision. They need debriefing, they need training, they need a lot of work to integrate them into the team. And then they become very, very useful, but they don't replace GPs. And I think this is the difficulty for them too, because they're being harassed and hounded by the press and so on. I think very unfairly. Yeah, I just wanted to corroborate really what Charles was saying.
Okay, thank you. Andy?
I was just going to come back to Charles's question about sort of cases and community clinics and so on, and I think it still remains a priority for us in terms of, we think it's an opportunity to bring services closer to practice and to patients, to enable GPs and colleagues to develop a range of skills and therefore attract people out of hospital careers into general practice. And it feels like over the last 10, 15 years that our scope to do sort of stuff that's beyond core in practice is just completely dwindled, because we're just too busy. We're too busy doing the day-to-day. And I stopped doing minor surgery at the practice in the last 12 months because it just felt like it was a luxury that we couldn't afford given the demand on the front door. And something has to change from that point of view. And the only way to change it is to think, to think differently about that same day demand, but also to for the commissioners to think about how do they do things differently in an integrated way at a neighbourhood level. And I think using stuff like cases and peer reviewing GPs and training and upskilling is a way to actually solve some of our workforce problems.
But sorry, Andy, just to come back on that, I suppose my question was, having worked, I would say largely ineffectively in the CCG, trying to persuade a monolithic teaching hospital trust to release some of its funding and capacity, and working in a CCG, you know, where we tried to change contracting, but that was hard enough. I just wonder what it's like across the footprint of South Yorkshire Bassetlaw, and, you know, whether the ICB is likely to see the future of community services in primary care, or whether actually that's even harder now.
When you say community services, do you mean community sort of specialist service or enhanced services?
Yeah, I mean the just obvious things that GPs should be doing, like dermatology, cardiology, gynecology, and so on.
Yeah, I think the ICB's too much in its infancy to comment on that at this point. But I think, you know, Joe's question around have the running cost reductions impacted. I think that's where some of the stuff hasn't been commissioned because there's been other distractions as a new organisation has formed and old ones have gone. But I think pathway work is still there on the agenda. There's a whole load of challenges around a range of different specialties. We keep talking about the cases model as one way of empowering general practice to do more, but it has to be doing more with more resource. It can't be just doing more without it.
Thank you. I just, just to sort of try and cover different bases. One of the things just want to throw in is just there was a reasonable feeling at the workshops in the summer that I was at, in terms of, and I think Andy mentioned it, about the GP collaborative and walk-in centre, and trying to move, for PCS to take some ownership of that. I wondered if there was any views on that from any of you, in terms of strength of feeling, in terms of trying to wrestle that from secondary care. Thomas.
I suspect I speak for many people here when I say there's a strong positive view of that, and I think things that I'm keen to sort of point out with that is to make things more integrated, as well as higher quality. But I think that integration is a key part, and again that's a challenge for PCS. But again, what PCS does well.
Yeah, thank you. Any other views on that? Same strength of feeling, in terms of, there has been a focus on that, a bit like Amir started, in terms of these things don't happen quickly. There's no doubt about that, but it's not something that we've given up on, and it's something that's being pushed by the executive, being pushed by myself. So we are working on it.
Colin, just on that point, integration, yeah, I think it would be a great idea. The hubs partially were successful with that. The thing that we need to bear in mind is that if we can empower or engage the local GP community, the trouble with kind of out of hours services is that very soon, due to all kinds of reasons, mainly resource and lack of manpower, they end up occasionally being manned by, inverted commas, professional locums, inverted commas. If we could engage the local community, be it sessional GPs, be it partners, be it salaried GPs, to see and finish the interaction with our patients as far as possible, rather than to see at that point in time and then say, go and see your GP tomorrow, which has always been a kind of frustration, really. As I say, part of it works really well with the hubs when you've got experienced partners within the same network, or people that you kind of know, and the ability to order tests, etc., has been very successful. So I would be very, very much in favour of an out-of-hours service that was integrated in that manner.
Thanks, Amir. Lucy?
I just think there's a real opportunity, and it comes back a little bit to what Marie challenged us to at the beginning about health inequalities. At the moment, we've got a load of out-of-hours services that are not joined up, are completely disparate, that don't talk to each other, and our patients are totally confused by them, and therefore, it's really hard for them to access them. If we could bring them together under people who understand primary care, we could direct people to the right place, and we could have the services in the areas that are good for our patients. We could have additionality in areas that need them. We could have translated services. I just think this is the point where we really need to challenge the system to make it work for us in primary care, rather than it just being about lots of different organisations working for themselves and not necessarily working for what our patients in primary care really need. And I feel really strongly that we need to try and do something to make that different for our populations.
Thanks, Lucy. Thomas?
Don't want to jump on the bandwagon of other services that we're keen to have back in primary care, but of course, community nursing, we are very, very keen for that to be, again, held within primary care. Sound like a broken record sometimes, don't we?
Well, obviously, some of you guys have been around this and on these topics for a considerable period of time, so I can understand that. Lindsay?
I would like to ask about GP Collab, which I know we talked about the walk-in centre and then into out of hours. But I know previously we were asked by some practices if we could help them with things because the GP collab prices are going up about the evening, you know, that 6 or 6:30 timeline, that lunchtime. And at that time I said, it's going to be really difficult to find cover for that hour period. However, since then, I started investigating things and realised that actually at lunchtime is all they're actually doing is answering your phones. So I'd be really interested in people's thoughts on that as well. Not for now, certainly not for 1st of April. But if it was something people were interested in, we could start looking at what we could do and what we could develop for the year after.
Something for later thoughts. Any other views? GP Collab, Walking Centre, or any other wider views? Again, I just come back to where we started here. It's about aligning our medium-term strategy, and you know, challenging whether we've got that right in terms of some of the things that were discussed in the summer. Obviously, the Walking Centre, GP Collab is part of what we're trying to do. Anything we've not covered that people would like to raise, or anything that you feel that we should be changing our tack over the medium term? Thomas?
Forgive me if this has been mentioned before and I missed it, but given the time of flux, again, pushing a national agenda, I think PCS has a good reputation nationally as I understand things. It would be great to hear about the push that you are doing nationally as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, Tom. It would be really good to, and we've done this, but it would be really good to know what things people wanted us to push nationally. In other words, you know, is there something, other specific issues, and we have done, you know, so we've taken issues to number 10 even through off the back of COVID around inequalities and around some other stuff. We've put out the questions to CDs and others. But I guess the other thing is there a model that you want us to push, or is there something specific that you want us to push in terms of what we want to do in Sheffield? Because again, we can do that. We do have connections in. I'm not suggesting that it's, you know, how much it's listened to, but we certainly have the connections.
Okay. Tom?
I was just going to make the comment that I think a few people have asked questions about sort of relationship with ICB, what's it like with cases, and you know, years of trying to move things in Sheffield with little success. I mean, I think it's worth saying it is really difficult at the moment, that the system is not listening very hard to all of that sort of stuff around moving activity into primary care, left shift, and actually its whole time is taken up currently with the running cost reductions, getting the waiting lists down, providing access and balancing the books. And I think if you're looking at it sort of from a clear-eyed point of view, it would be worth just recognizing that. I think why that's important is that the more lined up that we can be, the more chance we have of making any of these changes that we want to see happen. And I think that sort of speaks to Andy's question there about what is it that we want PCS to be advocating for. The more clear and lined up we can be about that, and the more we can get alongside it, the better chance we have of getting any traction with any of this stuff with commissioners, ICB, and the rest of the system.
Thanks, Tom. Any other thoughts on that? Clearly, after this event, if you've got questions to put in, the communication channels Lindsay mentioned about coming out. Sorry, Charles, just caught your hand there. Go on.
Yeah, I'm afraid I've forgotten how to raise my hand on Zoom. I can't seem to find it. Okay, I'm going to give you an apology now. So I'm the one who, working for the CCG and getting sucked into how to make community services pay for themselves, probably is responsible in part for closing down some of the community services that Central set up. And I apologize for that now, and I think I was misguided in my leadership at the time. But what I've seen happening through the networks is innovation, an innovation that's not looking at the bottom right hand of the balance sheet and trying some things out. And I think, given what Tom's saying, we're going to have a really tough job to move some resources when it's, pardon my French, it's bleeding obvious that the way to deal with the hospital waiting lists is to develop community services at a fraction of the cost. And we're just not set up for that transfer of funds. But I suppose my plea is to not listen to people like me working in the ICB and just get on and try some things out, have some experiments, make some mistakes, and really argue the case.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Any other points? I'm not, I did say at the outset, and the agenda's 8:30, but certainly not going to hold people here against their will. If there's more questions to answer or more points want to be made, then happy for you to bring them in. Otherwise, I'm also happy to close it down. Any other hands, either yellow or waving? Okay. All right. I'm happy to draw the evening to a close early. Did want to finish before 8:30. I would really appreciate you coming out, and thank you for varied questions and discussions. Really appreciate that. As I said, hopefully the communication machine, which I do think has improved significantly over the last 2 or 3 years, that there are opportunities for you to feed in. As Andy said earlier, in terms of the business plan for this year, in terms of voting for that and such, that'll take place after, so we'll be in contact outside of this meeting. But I'd just like to wish you all a nice evening. Hopefully you can get your food if you've not had food, and thank you all for attending, and thank you everybody for chipping in. We'll have a look at any comments in there in the chat to see if we've missed anything or if anything needs a response, and we'll pick that up as well. So thank you, and good night from everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.